Trump's naval blockade, the most dangerous gamble in modern history. The United States claims that somewhere on the floor of the Strait of Hormuz, right now, there are mines that nobody can find. Iran planted them. And then Iran somehow lost track of them. That single line tells you everything you need to know about how dangerous this situation has become. Because it means that even if Donald Trump and Iran's supreme leader shook hands on a peace deal tomorrow, ships still cannot safely pass through the world's most critical waterway. The mines are there, silent, invisible, waiting. And as of 10 a.m. this morning, the United States Navy began its own blockade of Iranian ports, sailing warships directly into those same waters. 2 nuclear-capable powers, 1 narrow strait, and an unknown number of uncharted mines sitting on the ocean floor between them. This is the Hormuz Files. And what happened in the last 24 hours has no precedent in modern history. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the speed of this escalation has been breathtaking. On Sunday, April 12th, J.D. Vance walked out of Islamabad after 21 hours of failed negotiations and boarded Air Force Two back to Washington. Within hours, Donald Trump posted on social media. His words were unambiguous. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. US Central Command confirmed the blockade would be enforced on all ships entering or leaving Iranian ports and coastal areas. Any vessel entering or departing the blockaded area without authorization is subject to interception, diversion, and capture. The blockade began at 10 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, Monday, April 14th, and the immediate effect was felt instantly. Early on April 13th, the oil tanker Rich Starry, loaded with Iranian crude and headed for China, made a dramatic U-turn. Instead of exiting the Strait of Hormuz as planned, it joined a stationary flotilla of about 800 other vessels, including 400 oil and gas tankers, most of which have remained stranded since late February. Fortune 800 ships, going nowhere. And Iran's response was immediate and ferocious. The Iranian military declared the US naval blockade illegal, calling it an act of piracy, and warned that no Gulf ports would be safe if its own were threatened. Iran's parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the same man who sat across the table from J.D. Vance in Islamabad, posted on social media with cold fury that the so-called blockade would soon make Americans nostalgic for $4 to $5 gas. That is not a negotiating position. That is a threat. And it is a threat backed by the most dangerous naval situation on Earth. Now let's put this in its full, terrifying context. Because what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now has never happened before in modern history. Iran blockaded the world's oil supply for 44 days, charging ships over $1 million per vessel just to attempt passage. Now America is blockading Iran's ports, threatening to intercept any ship that paid that toll. 2 of the most powerful military forces on Earth are blockading each other simultaneously in a waterway 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. And underneath those waters, the mines. Reports indicate Iran lost track of mines it planted in the strait, meaning even Iran cannot fully reopen the waterway. The US Navy began operations to clear naval mines on April 11th, sailing guided missile destroyers into waters where the exact location of Iranian mines is unknown. Think about what that means operationally. American sailors are navigating warships through a minefield in a blockade against an enemy that has already demonstrated the ability to strike American military bases across the entire Gulf region. And the economic consequences of this double blockade are catastrophic. Oil could rise to $150 a barrel under a full US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, according to analysts at Onyx Capital Group. The head of the International Energy Agency has already called the current disruption the worst energy shock the world has ever seen, more severe than the oil crises of the 1970s and the Ukraine war combined. And now America just made it worse. Professor Jiang said in 2024 that America would walk into a trap. Scott Ritter confirmed on day 3 that the regime change operation had failed. Colonel McGregor warned that the economic consequences would be catastrophic. They were all right, and the trap just got deeper. Here is the dimension of this story that mainstream media is almost completely ignoring. And it may be the most consequential factor of all. China imports nearly 1/3 of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A US naval blockade of Iranian ports directly threatens Chinese energy supply. Trump has instructed the US Navy to intercept any vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. China has been buying Iranian oil throughout this war, which means American warships could theoretically intercept Chinese vessels in international waters. That is not a US-Iran conflict anymore. That is a potential US-China incident at sea. And Ray McGovern, our new voice this episode, has been warning about exactly this scenario for months. McGovern served as a CIA analyst for 27 years, briefing 7 US presidents from John F. Kennedy to George H.W. Bush. He chaired national intelligence estimates and helped prepare the Presidential Daily Brief, the most sensitive intelligence document in the world. He returned his CIA Intelligence Commendation Medal in protest at the agency's involvement in torture. This is a man whose entire career was built on speaking truth to power, even when power did not want to hear it. McGovern has argued that the same pattern visible in earlier wars is resurfacing. Intelligence assessments becoming politically compressed into narratives that favor escalation. The same machinery that manufactured justifications for the Iraq War is now running the Iran operation. And on the nuclear question, the central sticking point that collapsed the Islamabad talks, McGovern has a devastating response to Washington's position. He points to the 2007 US National Intelligence Estimate, which concluded with high confidence across 14 intelligence agencies that Iran halted all work on a nuclear weapons program in 2003 and had not resumed it. Iran's supreme leader issued a religious edict banning nuclear weapons that same year. America went to war and to a blockade over a nuclear threat that its own intelligence community said, with high confidence, does not exist. That is Ray McGovern's verdict. A 27-year CIA veteran, a man who briefed the President of the United States, and he is saying Washington does not know what it is doing. George Galloway has one question that cuts through every press release and every diplomatic statement like a blade. If America's blockade succeeds in cutting off Iran's oil exports, Iran loses $45 billion a year, 13% of its entire economy. But if Iran retaliates by targeting Gulf ports, as it has explicitly threatened, the global economy loses trillions. Saudi Arabia loses its oil infrastructure. The UAE loses its financial system. And America loses the petrodollar that underpins its entire global dominance. Galloway's conclusion is the same as it has been from the beginning. America is not winning this confrontation. It is escalating because it does not know how to exit. Professor Marandi, speaking from Tehran, where the bombs fell for 40 days, has been even more specific. Tehran has no problem making decisions. The problem lies with the other side. The Strait of Hormuz is under Iran's control, and the United States is unable to do anything about it. And here is the detail that nobody in the Western press is reporting with the urgency it deserves. 230 loaded oil tankers are currently waiting inside the Gulf, unable to move. Oil production from Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE has dropped by at least 10 million barrels per day. 70% of the Gulf region's food imports have been disrupted, forcing retailers to airlift staples and triggering a 40 to 120% spike in consumer food prices across the Gulf states. This is not a military conflict anymore. This is a humanitarian and economic catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. And America just poured fuel on it. So where does this go from here? The Hormuz Files assessment as of today, April 14th, 2026, gives you 3 possible outcomes and 1 honest probability on each. Outcome 1. Iran blinks. The blockade cuts off $45 billion of Iranian oil revenue. Economic pressure forces Iran back to the table on America's nuclear terms. Probability, low. Iran has survived decades of sanctions. Its leadership has repeatedly demonstrated it will accept economic pain before strategic surrender. Outcome 2. Miscalculation triggers war resumption. An American warship hits an Iranian mine, or a US Navy vessel intercepts a Chinese tanker. One incident in those waters, one explosion, and the ceasefire is dead and the bombing restarts within hours. Probability, dangerously high, and rising every hour the blockade continues. Outcome 3. Back-channel diplomacy produces a face-saving formula. Both sides find language that allows America to claim it got nuclear commitments and allows Iran to claim it maintained its rights. The blockade quietly winds down. The ceasefire holds. Possible, but requires political will on both sides that has not been visible in 44 days of war. The Hormuz Files will be watching every development, every hour, because the next 72 hours in that strait may be the most consequential 72 hours since the war began on February 28th. Subscribe if you have not already. Share this video right now, because what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz today will affect the price of everything you buy tomorrow. And drop a comment below. Which outcome do you think happens first? I will see you in the next file.